Time now to check in on some major political news so far this week with our good friend Ryland Barton, who's with NPR. Good to see you, Ryland.
Hi, Renee.
So let's talk about the big, beautiful bill, right? And let's talk specifically about how it's playing with one of the largest hospital associations, or they advocate on behalf of large and small hospitals. The Kentucky Hospital Association had been in favor of the House version of the big, beautiful bill, which is the president's tax cut and spending plan. But when it reached the Senate and there were some cuts made to Medicaid, they have called that, quote, devastating to rural hospitals that could lead to some substantial cuts in services and perhaps even layoffs. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, and really both versions are going to cut Medicaid. It's just this version, this way that the Senate version proposes to cut in Medicaid, the Kentucky Hospital Association disagreed with. They were worried that this version will actually lead to a cut of about 20,000 jobs in Kentucky in hospital and healthcare jobs. So that initial statement was unusual because most other state and national hospital associations have opposed both versions of the big, beautiful bill. In this interview with Kentucky Public Radio, a representative from the Kentucky Hospital Association said that these Senate changes to the bill will devastate healthcare in the state. He called it a double blow because not only would it damage healthcare for people, but it would also damage the economy. And so there have been a lot of worries about how this would affect the healthcare industry in rural places, especially that are very dependent on not only healthcare but Medicaid. So and in Kentucky, they're the largest employer in a lot of rural communities, or at least the second largest compared to the school systems. And these are jobs for doctors, therapists, other healthcare providers. The KHA also, they were highlighting changes. The problem, they said, is the changes to how the hospital rate improvement program works, which is kind of this reimbursement program for Medicaid to hospitals, that this would it would basically leave these hospitals out of whack without Medicaid. Anything that was paid, any services that were paid for under Medicaid wouldn't be reimbursed at a rate that is competitive with other hospitals that are getting like the normal commercial rate, or other patients that are under other commercial insurances. So that program was approved by the Kentucky legislature in 2019, a Republican-led legislature, also approved by the first Republican Trump administration and the Biden administration. So it's a program that has gone through both parties and been approved. And if this version of the bill goes forward, that's going to be done away with. And so Kentucky Hospital Association is joining in with all, the other hospital associations in opposing those parts of the bill.
Yeah. And we know that the federal delegation on Kentucky's behalf in Washington is also split on this, with Senators Rand Paul and Representative Thomas Massie holding firm in their opposition to the big, beautiful bill, as they see it as being a debt bloater. In fact, Representative Massie has described the bill, quote, as a fiscal suicide pact between the White House and Republicans in Congress. But this could come at a hefty political price to Thomas Massie. But he does have one big leaguer in his corner. Who is that?
Yeah, that's Elon Musk. And Elon Musk has gotten involved in some of these local races before. The big one that we saw earlier this year was the Wisconsin Supreme Court, where he put about $20 million into an election for one Wisconsin Supreme Court seat that he and Republicans thought was essential to kind of keeping or boosting their presence in Wisconsin. But he actually ended up losing that. So anyway, Elon Musk is going to be supporting, he says he's throwing his weight behind Thomas Massie in this fight between him and Donald Trump. And Trump last week, he launched, and his allies launched, this PAC against Thomas Massie's reelection, trying to encourage somebody to run against him. They already put a $1 million ad buy up, criticizing his votes against the big, beautiful bill, but also Massie was critical of Trump's bombing of Iran earlier or last month. And he said that it was unconstitutional. So this isn't the first fight that President Trump has gotten into with Massie. And he did this all the way back to the coronavirus pandemic, because Massie is opposing certain policies. Earlier this year, Massie also opposed House Speaker Mike Johnson and other, his election to the speakership, and other Republican priorities, and also Trump's other priorities. So we will see how this shakes out. There isn't a candidate just yet to run against Massey. Republican State Senator, first-term Republican State Senator Aaron Reed has been thrown around as somebody who might be picked for that. But really, at this point, Massey's national profile has really grown. It's a huge thing for any member of Congress, or especially the House of Representatives, to get to the level where he's got all these headlines because he's sticking his neck out over some of these issues with the president. And, he's grown increasingly popular, or at least over the years, he's grown increasingly popular in his district. So we'll see if really he's able to be toppled. But we could just be also seeing a big, expensive race next year in 2026 if this is all still going on then.
Yeah, that's right. And we know that Thomas Massey had reported some impressive fundraising numbers after his little tiff with the president a couple of months ago, right? So he was doing fairly well with his coffers. And we'll see if Senator Aaron Reed, State Senator Aaron Reed, who is a first-term state senator in the Kentucky General Assembly, he's supposed to be at the White House in the next few weeks. We'll see what comes of that. And finally, in our time remaining, let's talk about the ICE raids. Immigration enforcement is really ramped up. And we know that there are twice as many Kentucky law enforcement agencies who are now involved in this effort than there were just at the end of March. Tell us more.
Yeah, the Hero Leader had this story, and it's about these 287G agreements, which is what gives local law enforcement the power to enforce immigration law, which is normally a power reserved for the federal government. There were only 5 of these local governments, and these are like sheriff's offices and jails that or local agencies that had signed up for this. And now there's at least 6 more. The largest is Kenton County. Several more counties have agreed to also house ICE inmates over the years. Part of the deal, besides politics of this, is that the federal government actually pays a lot more to house federal inmates than these jails get to house local inmates. So it's nearly twice the rate that they get paid to house state inmates. And advocates are really worried that really the more local police and the more local jails that are used, the more examples we're going to hear of people who are getting unjustly detained. We've already had some stories of that in Kentucky. You've heard stories about that around the country. There's a Bowling Green teenager who's detained by ICE in June, despite having legal documentation saying he was in the country legally. He was actually, his case is still pending. We're waiting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, a lot to follow and a lot of different fronts. Thank you, Ryland Barton, for always breaking it down for us.
Thanks, Renee.